Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have Parsha Noah. This is one of the most exciting parshas in the entire Torah because ultimately we're starting the entire Torah all over again. We just started last week with Bereshit, in the beginning. So it's very exciting. There's so many themes. This one, of course, we have the flood, Tower of Babel, so many different themes here. I want to focus one just on Noah. Noah. Again, just to recap for those who aren't familiar, basically what happens is that beginning of the parsha, what happens is we're introduced to Noah. Noah, this is his generations, a man righteous in his generations. Basically, the world was corrupted, awful. People were stealing, cheating, killing each other. And Noah and his family, Noah, his 3 sons and their wives and their children, were the only righteous people in the entire world. And so what happens is that God basically says, of course, you, Noah, have 120 years to build a giant ark to basically put on 2 of every species, a male and a female of every species, onto the ark, and then, I'm going to flood the entire world, and you and your children will start it all over again. Okay, fine. And there are many different ways, literal and less literal, figurative, to understand this, but I think ultimately that's less important right now. What I want to talk about is ultimately right at the beginning of the Parsha. Of course, many may be familiar with this, where it says that Noah was righteous in his generations. He walked with God. Most of the Jewish commentators say, what does this mean, he was righteous in his generation? Most of the commentators say what this means is that Noah was a righteous man, but ultimately, really by comparison. I mean, he was righteous, but really what it means is that everyone in his generation was so bad that he really stuck out by comparison. If he were in a generation where everyone were righteous, he probably wouldn't have stuck out so much. Really here it's that he was righteous, but everyone was so bad that really he just, it made him look so much better by comparison. And so, why is that the case? Why is it the case is that, again, we read that Noah was given 120 years to build an ark. Why does it take 120 years to build an ark? And why, if God, who only a few chapters ago we learned was the creator of the entire world, why does he need to have Noah take 120 years or even 10 minutes to make an ark? Couldn't he have simply snapped his fingers, so to speak, and all these wicked people would disappear? I mean, what's the point of this whole thing? What the commentators say is that Noah was given 120 years in order ultimately to be a conversation starter. Imagine you're in the middle of the desert and you're building an enormous ark, okay, for 120 years. This is going to be a conversation starter. People are going to say, Noah, what's that going on there? What are you building? He's going to say, oh, this is an ark because God is not happy with the way the world is going. He's going to destroy everyone. Oh, okay. So in other words, Noah had an opportunity of 120 years to communicate with the world that the path they were on was leading to their destruction. Now it's interesting, the Haftarah we read, in other words, the readings from the prophets we read on during this week, it's from Isaiah chapter 54, and it's very interesting, is that in that Haftarah, Isaiah calls the flood of Noah. Now it's interesting, why is this called the flood of Noah? Think of it, when there's a new medical invention, or a comet or a star, something is discovered or something's invented. It's named after the person who invented it, who is the cause of it, right? We have, Comet Hale-Bopp, named after the discoverer. Or we have, the Jarvik Health System, named after Robert Jarvik. So again, everything that's invented or discovered, is discovered after the person who invented it. And yet, so why does Isaiah, the prophet in the Haftarah, called this the flood of Noah? Noah didn't create the floods. He was the only one who survived the floods. Him and his family. It would be everyone else. It should be, the flood of the wicked or the flood of the evil. The commentators say is that Noah had 120 years to essentially convince the world, show the world that the path they were on was faulty. Why else would he have been given more than 100 years to build an ark? And because he was unsuccessful in that, ultimately, the responsibility and the blame for the flood ultimately rests on Noah's shoulders. And so the lesson from us here is that Noah, as the Torah says, walked with God. Abraham, according to the Torah, walked before God. Abraham, when it came to the Sodom and Gomorrah, he fought with God. He said, God, if there are 50 people who are righteous, will you spare them? 40, he was fighting with God. He fought for humanity. Noah, when God told him, I'm going to destroy the world, he said, okay, how big does the boat need to be? And so again, the take-home lesson for us is that as righteous as Noah was, he was righteous. He was a tzaddik. He did a good job. He was leading a very moral, righteous life. So why is it that he was called righteous only by comparison to them? And ultimately, he has the blame for the flood. It's because Noah had an inward focus. He was righteous and he was holy. There's no doubt about that. But ultimately, he basically ignored the world in a time of extreme crisis. And so this is what the Torah is telling us, is that ultimately the big mistake that he made and the big mistake that we are to avoid, and ultimately that's the difference between what a righteous guy is, who's righteous in his generation, and what a righteous person across all generations is. So the lesson for us is to say, of course we want to be raising good, holy, we want to have good family values, we want to raise a good family, we want to be good business people, and good children, and good parents, and friends, and of course all of that. But that in no way excludes us and takes away our opportunity and our responsibility to be good, caring, responsible Jews, to take care of the world around us. And again, if Noah, who, he wasn't a Jew, but nonetheless he squandered his opportunity to do that, if he can still be righteous in his generations for screwing that up and for causing the destruction of all humanity, imagine what we can do if we are not only righteous in ourselves and for our own immediate surroundings, but ultimately, if we have that outward focus as well, we can bring other Jews back. We can fight for Israel. We can stop so many terrible things going on in the world. That is what ultimately the Torah is telling us. That's what true righteousness is. So my hope and blessing for all of us, of course, is that we can use this lesson to look and say, how can I, what skills and abilities and passions do I have, that not only can I build myself as a good person and as a spiritual person, but I can look forward and turn outside to the world as well and say, how can I make the world a better place and my community a better place, fight for the Jewish people as well. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom, God bless.